Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, Surah Bani Israel, chapter 17, and we will cover verses 55 to 60. The law of decline of nations in the world. There is one verse which is on this rise and fall of nations. So that is from where I have taken the topic of this presentation. There are some other issues which are also discussed. These are the references. And this is our contact in case of anyone wishes to contact us regarding this presentation or any of our previous presentations. An overview of today's presentation. We need to know as much as possible about the aspects of Rabubiyat in the human world as well as in the universe. This is part of acquiring a self which has become ready for the system of Deen. This self also needs to know the sphere of responsibility of the various messengers of Allah as noted in the Quran. It is also important to know the mechanism of functioning in the human world and the way human beings operate under man-made systems. The Quran places no intermediaries between human beings and Allah, and this aspect is important to understand through the Quran. If we fail to come to grips with this concept, then essentially we cannot understand the slavery being engaged in under man-made systems. Because we know that Quran deals with human psyche, and unless the transformation in the human psyche takes place, it is not possible to come to the system of Deen, to understand that what kind of chains we carry in terms of beliefs and the concepts which emanate out of the man-made systems. Nations destroy themselves by not keeping the law of requital in front of them and thus not holding themselves accountable. All this is explained in the Quran. The decline of nations does not come to pass suddenly. It is preceded by clear warnings and signs. Nothing occurs in the universe haphazardly and at random. Everything follows precise laws. So wherever our mind goes towards this kind of a thought that there is randomness in the affairs of human beings, we should overcome that and counter it from the Quran so that we know that everything follows laws, and wherever we do not understand it, we should make an effort to discover it. Let us go to the first verse of today's presentation, 1755. The sphere of influence of each messenger of Allah was different. وَرَبُّكَ عَالَمُ بِمَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلَقَدْ فَضَّلْنَا بَعْضَ النَّبِيِّينَ عَلَى بَعْضٍ وَآتَيْنَا دَاوُودَ زَبُورًا. This is not just about these people. Whoever exists in the highs and lows of the universe, your Rabb is aware of the state of everyone. It was based on this very knowledge of ours that we sent our messengers to different nations according to their circumstances and conditions. As messengers, they were all alike, but according to the sphere and extent and influence of their teaching, they were differentiated according to their sphere of activity. Among them, there was also a Nabi such as Dawood, to whom we also bestowed the book, and together with it, such a great kingdom whose example cannot be found in that era. From the point of view of being a Nabi, he was like other Anbiya, but when the divine system reigns in such a vast and wide empire, then its domain of influence can be imagined. Expanding few aspects of this verse, after making it clear that the ability to reach Rabb is in every nook and corner of the universe, because all creations have to reach their defined destination, which is defined at the time of their creation. This is part of the process of Rabubiyat. This fact is noted in verse, for example, 2050. The point over here is that Allah has created this universe, and all that creation within this universe is to be guided as well. And this guidance is provided Allah as Rabb, and this is part of his Rabubiyat. And we have gone through some of these aspects previously as well. Over here, Rabbuna allazi ata kulla shayin khalqahu summa hada. If we look at this verse, we will see that these words come out of the lips of the messenger Musa. when he is confronting Pharaoh with his demeanors. Our Rabb is he who gave to each thing its form and nature and further gave guidance. In another place, he points to scales and guidance. Wallazi Kaddara Fahada, who ordained scales, that is, laws, and granted guidance. So, guidance is provided to every creation in the universe, and human beings are also provided this guidance in the form of Allah's Wahi, and now it is preserved in the Quran. This needs to be viewed from this aspect that everything in the world and the universe is carefully planned and being managed according to the laws ordained by Allah. Human creation is unique because man is to participate in the creation process of Allah. And this creation consists of two aspects. One is creative activity in the physical domain, which is related to this life in the physical world. The second is to create a system called Deen, whose limits extend beyond the physical domain. The Quran contains guidance for both these domains. And that is the relationship of messengers with people of their own time. They were passed Wahi from Allah and they communicated it to other human beings. But after the revelation of the Quran, the Wahi has been completed and human beings also, as a race, as a community, has reached that stage where they can now look after themselves and understand the Wahi of Allah, and they do not need any more messenger from Allah. They have acquired that kind of a maturity and, of course, the technology as well, where they can look through the Quran and understand it themselves. Continuing on this verse, 1755, Allah sent the messengers with Wahi in order to guide mankind in the domain of managing their mutual affairs, for which human intellect alone was insufficient. And this point is very easy to understand because the world which is around us is created by pure human intellect. And all the problems, chaos, fear, huzn, which is created by human intellect, this cannot be removed. And for that, we need those intellects which are convinced of the Wahi of Allah and are willing to tread on this path. These messengers had different spheres of operation in the world depending upon the size of the population which they had to deal with. So we cannot differentiate between messengers. We cannot say one messenger was superior to another. That is wrong to say because all these messengers had their own area of responsibility and they operated within that area of responsibility once Wahi came to them. And this aspect becomes very clear as we go through various accounts of different messengers, which is noted in the Quran. However, the fundamentals of the message of Wahi remained the same. For example, Iman and its constituents and self-development via Saleh deeds. They all followed the Wahi of Allah and shared it with their people and nation. Here the Quran has referred to the sphere of their responsibilities and has instructed us never to differentiate between them, but to treat them with equal respect. And that is very important because if people are tilted and biased in these things, that means they haven't understood the system of Deen and they haven't understood the Quran and its purpose for creating a system for whole of mankind. If we have biases and prejudices within us and we have failed to overcome them, then we will have a problem in understanding the Quran. Towards the end, the messenger Dawood is mentioned in order to inform us that when we follow the guidance of the book of Allah, power in the land does come into the hands of the mu'mineen. Another aspect to which I thought about is that over here Quran has given an example that, for example, in the case of messenger, the area of his responsibility was far bigger than some other messengers because he had a big kingdom which he managed at that time. Next verse, 1756, benefit and loss in the human world needs to be understood. قُلْ أَدْعُوا الَّذِينَ زَعَمْتُم مِّن دُونِهِ فَلَا يَمْلِكُونَ كَشْفَ الضُّرِّ عَنكُمْ وَلَا تَحْوِيلًا. Say to them that those beings whom you consider as holders of authority other than Allah, just try calling to them and then see. You will see that they possess neither the power that they can deflect any trouble which is about to visit you according to our law, nor the power that they can change your circumstances. This is something this verse presented me a challenge because how to relate it to the man-made system around us. And I tried to relate it to the aspects which are covered in the world around us. Further reflections. This verse requires deep scrutiny of the man-made world. We observe that in Pharaoh's world, power belongs to the powerful nations, and we see this happening in the world of 2024. However, the Quran has assured us that when this power structure is viewed closely, you will see that true power belongs in reality to the laws of Allah. And that is the crux of it, that even in the man-made system, all the results which are manifesting themselves and all the outcomes of human actions are coming out, are being manifested following Allah's laws. For example, when people do wrong, the wrong outcomes display themselves in the real world. Although there is no model of a system of Deen anywhere in the world, through deep reflection, study, and discourse, evidence of the functioning of the laws of Allah in the human world can be ascertained. Another aspect is that even under man-made systems, knowledge of the permanent values, divine attributes, and the law of requital help to guide us to navigate these systems and thus avoid their pitfalls. And that is important, that even in the man-made system, we can avoid pitfalls by keeping in view the values which we have learned from the Quran, and as much as we can practice them for developing ourselves within the constraints of the man-made system. Here the Quran invites us to acquire this firm conviction so that we are in a position to inform others that under the system of Deen, all those responsibilities will be carried out which Allah has asked us to attend to. Next verse 1757, which is actually a continuation of verse 56, analyzing the power structure in the human world using the Quran. أولئك الذين يدعون تبغون إلى ربهم الوسيلة أيهم أقرب ويرجون رحمته ويخافون عذابه إن عذاب ربك كان محذورا. Those beings whom these people call out to be their aid, thinking them to be holders of authority, their own condition is such that those among them whom they view to be most close to them also remain in this yearning and desire that they should obtain a higher status and rank with Allah. They remain in expectation of the means of sustenance from His direction and fear of the destructive outcomes of going against His laws. They know that these destructions are such that it is essential to remain protected from them. So we need to understand the power structure of the system around us. Further reflections on this verse. Continuing from the previous verse, here our attention is drawn to a fact based on evidence in the human world. People view those who are in power with envy and wish to have access to them. This is also true in the realm of religion where spirituality plays its role, and those who are considered more holy and saintly take advantage of this status of theirs. And this includes monetary benefits plus self-praise. Next is, here the Quran has made it clear that at a fundamental level, all human beings are equal, and ranks among them are determined not by worldly possessions and wealth, but by keeping in mind that everyone is looking for access to the means of sustenance, Rab, and wants some kind of rahmat, i.e. growth and development. And a lot of these things are prevalent under the man-made system because of inequality in the distribution of wealth and sustenance. In order to remove the influence of intermediary human beings, it is better to understand the purpose of human life through the concept of Rab, i.e., there is a higher destination awaiting man, and he should not look to other human beings as the means to gain eminence and development. And this is the purpose of the Quran, that it is making us realize our own importance, our own eminence, that each one of us have a very high purpose of being created, and then we are to go on to the higher level of further evolution after death. Few more comments on this verse 1757. The Quran draws our attention to those hidden aspects of the human psyche which are not accessible without its guidance. In these two verses, that is 56 and 57, our attention is drawn to the working of the law of requital so that we remain fully aware of our thoughts and deeds. At the thought level, if we acquire that way of thinking, which is constantly aware of the permanent values, then even under the man-made system, we will be aware of the pitfalls facing us in our daily living. This is where coming together and discussing these aspects is important so that we can gradually apprise our conduct under the man-made systems in which fear and anxiety prevails, even if we are a beneficiary of the system. Because by coming together and discussing means that we know that my own thoughts which are arising in my head are nothing new. Others are also facing similar issues so that we can compare our psyche and then move together. There is a continuous environment of tension and stress due to the uncertainties generated by man-made laws, which are continually violated and changed to control the public at large. The translations of these verses lead to the impression as if Allah is out to punish human beings. Not at all. Everything needs to be viewed in the light of the functioning of the law of requital and the permanent values. We know through the study of the Quran that wherever punishment appears, we should look for the cause for that. It is not Allah who is going to punish human beings. Human beings actually punish their own selves through their own deeds. The only thing is, in some of the verses, Allah relates it to Himself that it is His laws which manifest all these negative effects which are known as azab. 1757, to remain aware of the wrong consequences of our deeds. Since the problems of the common man remain unresolved in a man-made system, especially in those societies which are not dominated by religion, the populace reach out to intermediaries who claim to represent God and expect them to approach God to solve their problems. This does not tend to occur in societies in which some kind of welfare system is in place. So this is a manifestation of backwardness of a system in which human beings are not adequately provided with the daily sustenance of life. In these societies, the religion usually has less influence by virtue of possessing power through religion provided by those in power. The clergy exploits the vulnerability of the common man. Here the Quran invites us to acutely observe the conduct and behavior of all these people and analyze this incisively so that we can note the details of an undeveloped self. Comparison and contrast is important in order to enhance the level of our conviction. And Quran has used comparison and contrast in many verses where, for example, light and shadow are compared. Good and bad is compared. Society should be organized in such a way that the system should take care of the issues of the common man. For this, we need the system of Deen. The conclusion of the verse with Inna Zaba Rabbika Kana Mahzura points to the fact that we experience the consequences of our own deeds. Wherever fear of any kind becomes created, we need to analyze the cause for this. And that is important as students of the Quran, that we should look for the cause of every issue which is occurring, taking place in the man-made world. And same will be the case under the system of Deen as well, and create an environment within the world which can eliminate it. The Quran provides the recipe for this. By including Rab here, our attention is directed towards Rabubiyat, which holds the key to solving these issues of life. Next verse, 1758. The decline of nations is based on visible evidence. وَإِن مِّن قَرْيَةٍ إِلَّا نَحْنُ مُهْلِكُوهَا قَبْلَ يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ أَوْ مُعَذِّبُوهَا عَذَابًا شَدِيدًا كَانَ ذَلِكَ فِي الْكِتَابِ مَسْطُورًا. These people have arrogance in their wrong system of life and think that it is very strong and enduring and that no one can destroy it. Say to them that a wrong system can never be enduring, and that is important, because even if it looks very powerful and strong and like the superpowers of today, but there are seeds of destruction built in their foundations. There is no such nation that it can be the possessor of a wrong system and not become destroyed or trapped in a severe punishment in this very world. All this is documented in the code of our law of requital, and that law is immutable. And apparently, it looks very strong, but if we stretch it over a period of, let's say, 50 to 100 years, then we can see that how the decline sets in ultimately. Few more reflections. The Quran has presented the law dealing with the rise and fall of nations and invited us to keep it in front of us so that we are never deluded by the power amassed by these powerful nations. If we become impressed by this aspect, then it becomes impossible to come to the Quran looking for the system of Deen. And that is an important aspect of it, that if we are psychologically impressed by a powerful system, man-made system, then it is unlikely that we will come to the Quran because our psyche is affected by that. And for the psyche to be impressed by the Quran is then when we look at these laws which Allah has established, and these laws are immutable. And if we keep following the path of the Quran together, then we will see that gradually we will come to grips with the functioning of the law of requital. And with time, we can see the decline setting in the world, in the system, in the man-made system of those nations which are very powerful, and gradually the weak nations start to rise. Those who seek guidance from the Quran after becoming dissatisfied with the man-made systems and their tyranny and injustice look for an alternative system which can relieve mankind from the fear and grief in which they continuously live. So the issue before the students of the Quran is that, do we accept the man-made system and all the problems it creates, or we want a different system, an alternative system which is put forward by the Quran? Considering their short, finite physical existence, such human beings also want some assurance that this alternative system of the Quran has the potential to take shape during an average human lifespan. And that is important, because if the moment human beings start thinking that this system cannot be established within my lifespan, one can become discouraged. But the Quran says that that is not the case. If we follow the formula, the recipe of the Quran, precisely the way it puts forward, then this system can take shape within one average human lifespan. Here the Quran provides the answer to all kinds of doubts and conjectures arising in the human mind, and tells us that all is possible if we understand the laws functioning in the universe, of which the human world is a part. Continuing on this verse 1758, let us analyze the verse in parts. وَإِن مِّن قَرْيَةٍ إِلَّا نَحْنُ مُهْلِكُوهَا قَبْلَ يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. And over here, we should not take our mind towards Yawm al-Qiyamah, the day of the judgment, which is beyond death, because we have to relate it to this life, because Quran is talking about the decline of nations. There will not be one people who will become destroyed by us before the period when results become established. This means that all those nations which follow man-made laws are bound to meet their end due to their evil systems. This is inbuilt, and the law of requital does not make any exceptions. Such nations will suffer the consequences of their evil deeds. This is stated next, Mu'azzibuha azaban shadida. And this punishment or azab comes through their own hands. It is not Allah who imposes it on them. It is His law of requital which does the job. We can observe that both parts are related to Allah Himself, meaning that it is through His laws that nations suffer and bring wrath on themselves. This all takes place because these laws are noted in the book. It means that these laws are not secret. And Quran has explained all these laws from beginning to the end, but are accessible to us, and the Quran has detailed the procedure of self-destruction step by step. Why do nations become destroyed despite possessing intellectual and reasoning abilities? And that is an interesting point, because this is related to human psyche, that when human beings start following the wrong path, then gradually their hearts and minds become sealed, and they cannot see anything good in the world, and they keep following the wrong path. Wrong collective conduct contributes to destruction. There is another verse, 647, casts a light on this verse. Kul araitakum in atakum azabullahi baghtatan aw jahratan hal yuhliku illal qawmuz zalimun. And over here, Quran has detailed the reason for the destruction of any nation. Say, do you think if the punishment of Allah comes to you, whether suddenly or openly, and it comes suddenly because people are not prepared for it. Otherwise, signs are always there. The disease doesn't appear and one day it manifests its signs gradually. Or openly, will any be destroyed except those who resort to injustice? And Quran has very clearly said that if you do resort to injustice in the world, then you are going to be destroyed at some point in time in the future. It is made crystal clear that destruction is linked to unjust human deeds in the world. For example, in the world of 2024, where there is gross injustice being unleashed in all directions, and there is no land left which is not affected, despite possessing the Quran, Muslims are never seen on the media speaking about the Quranic view on this state of affairs. I just put down this comment to draw our own attention that what is going on in the world, and people who possess the Quran, they are also not looking in that direction to which the Quran is drawing our attention. The warnings are mostly coming from those who are non-Muslims and who are seeing the evidence of the powerful nations and those in power persistently doing wrong. This is due to the evil human psyche which these people acquire over a period of time and which leads to deliberately ignoring the obvious. Verse 643 notes this in an interesting style. وَلَكِنْ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَزَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. So what happens is, but their hearts became hardened and Shaitan made their acts seem alluring to them. So these two aspects are important, and we can see all these people who let loose injustice and murder in the world, their hearts have definitely become very hardened, and their own desires are really gone to that extent where they do not see any good in the world, and they resort to all kinds of chaos and conflicts. Now let us go to the next verse, 1759. Nothing occurs in the world without a tangible cause. وَمَا مَنَعْنَا أَن نُرْسِلَ بِالْآيَاتِ إِلَّا أَن كَذَّبَ بِهَا الْأَوَّلُونَ وَأَتَيْنَا ثُمُودَ النَّاقَةَ مُبْصِرَةً فَظَلَمُوا بِهَا وَمَا نُرْسِلُ بِالْآيَاتِ إِلَّا تَخْوِيفًا. It is the demand of these people that if destruction is about to engulf them, then some tangible sign of this should appear before them. Say to them that it is not at all difficult for us, that is Allah, to send these kinds of signs. We used to send such signs to former nations, which used to become news of the manifestation of a punishment for them. For example, we sent a she-camel as this kind of sign to the nation of Thamud, i.e., announced to them that if they did not allow this she-camel to drink water when its turn came, then it will be a sign of this fact that they do not wish to obey the divine law. And we can see a lot of gross injustice going on in every part of the world. Rather than becoming fearful at this and altering their path, they killed it instead. Whatever those former nations did with these kind of signs, this is what these people would have done. Hence, what benefit would there have been to them from this? Say to them that they should reflect on whatever they are told using their intellect and reasoning, and then decide for themselves whether the outcome of their wrong path will be success and prosperity, or annihilation and destruction. Further comments on this verse. If we look at the translation of this verse, it appears as if the Quran is talking about some miracles which were sent in the past but have been discontinued. This is not the case. And we should keep that in mind when we go through any of these translations, that the question of miracle doesn't arise in the Quran from Allah, because we know that through any miracles, if these ever happened, we force other human beings to accept something to which they haven't paid any attention themselves. They are not doing it voluntarily. It is being forced on them. As we know, the Quran does not resort to miracles and continuously emphasizes the use of intellect and reasoning to understand our own psyche and the world around us. Because under the influence of miracle, if there is any miracle, then human mind is affected by that, and without understanding the rational side of any event, they start believing that it is something which they cannot understand. And the moment human beings think they cannot understand, they will not make an effort to understand it. Any miracle, i.e., supernatural act or event which forces man to accept something, is against the human trait of choice and intent. And we should look at this verse. We have gone through this verse before as well, La ikraha fid Deen. And Quran has very clearly said that you should only accept Iman once you are fully convinced about it. Looking for miracles in the human world is a limitation of the human psyche and leads to false expectations. And we know these kind of concepts and beliefs, these are quite common among religious people, that miracles do happen, and all those things for which they do not understand the cause of it, or they somehow do not wish to know the cause of it, they think it is a miracle. Here the Quran has informed us that the signs of impending destructions of nations do appear well before their total annihilation from the scene. But these nations do not pay attention to these signs, and being intoxicated with power, they do not wish to change their evil path. This is in line with the permanent value of providing a warning before the destruction arrives, and we can easily witness this process working in the world of 2024. A lot of people are providing warning to all the rich and powerful nations and rich and powerful people at the top in every country that the path they are following is wrong. Continuing on this verse, 1759, then the verse refers to the example of the she-camel who was killed by the rebellious people of the messenger Saleh, despite making a covenant to let her roam around freely in the pastures as a symbol of equal access to natural resources made freely available by Allah for the use of everyone. And we should keep in mind, as students of the Quran, that the whole planet is given to mankind for the use of everyone. And the resources are not meant to be accumulated and hoarded so that the others don't benefit. The day we hoard something and through greed we accumulate wealth, that means we are doing injustice on the planet. There are many examples quoted by the Quran from the past which reflect on the various major evil deeds of different nations which ultimately became destroyed due to their own actions. And we have gone through these aspects that in order to have equitable distribution of these means of sustenance, we need the system of Deen. And system of Deen caters for the development, our physical development, as well as for the development of the human self. At least it provides us choice that whether we want to develop ourselves or not. Presently, that choice is not available to human beings across the world. We can relate this to the world around us. With every passing day, we witness the acts of evil hands who have acquired power in the world and are spreading fear, anxiety, grief, wars, conflicts, and we can add as many as we can come across in the world. And it appears that this may continue for the foreseeable future. However, there is one thing noticeable, that the general public is now more aware of what is going on in their name. Because through the social media, this information, free flow of information is taking place, and public can see through their politicians in every land. Despite what is going on in the world, students of the Quran should not discontinue their efforts towards the system of Deen. They should keep the events in the world under their watch and monitor the trends of these events so that there is no surprise, as the Quran states, أَوْ تَأْتِيهِمُ الْعَذَابُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ, or that the wrath will seize them from a direction they do not perceive. Because if, as the students of the Quran, we also get surprised by the wrath which as and when arrives on these nations, that means we haven't done our homework very well. Next verse, which is the last verse of today's presentation, 1760, events in the human life are manifested as signs. وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لَكَ إِنَّ رَبَّكَ أَحَاطَ بِالنَّاسِ وَمَا جَعَلْنَا الرُّؤْيَا الَّتِي أَرَيْنَاكَ إِلَّا فِتْنَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَشَجَرَةَ الْمَلْعُونَةَ فِي الْقُرْآنِ وَنُخَوِّفُهُمْ فَمَا يُزِيدُهُمْ إِلَّا طُغْيَانًا كَبِيرًا. If they were those who were going to employ intellect and reasoning, then how many matters had already appeared before them from which they could have reached this conclusion about what the end of this path of theirs is going to be. For example, we told you that our law of requital, having encircled these people, is taking them towards destruction. If they had paid attention to this, then it would have become very clear from circumstances and evidence that this statement is true. But they did not pay any heed to this. Then you narrated your dream to them that you will enter Makkah victorious and triumphant. They ridiculed this too, whereas if they had paused and reflected, then they would have easily reached this conclusion that the way circumstances are changing and the direction in which events are going are providing a clue to this reality that this dream becoming true is not far-fetched. Similarly, we had illustrated this through the metaphor of the tree of Zakum in the Quran, how these people who consider themselves to be so superior will be humiliated and disgraced. There are a couple of points over here regarding dreams. If we remember, we had covered this aspect in some detail under Surah Yusuf. And over here, there is also a mention of Al-Shajarat al-Malunata, which is quoted as tree of Zakum, and I have gone into some limited detail in our slides. In this way, we had continued to make them fearful and warned them about this coming destruction, but they became even more rebellious and intemperate by this. More reflections on this verse. This verse points to the fact that the law of requital of Allah is taking care of the collective path followed by nations, and the outcomes of deeds will manifest at some point in the future. Here, reference is made to a dream of the messenger, which is the manifestation of his subconscious desire for success and victory. When he disclosed the details of his dream to his companions as students of the Quran, they had no difficulty in interpreting it. However, those who were non-Quranic could not have related this to the events taking place around them through the hands of the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen. The Quran has provided guidance to the human thought process, which is influenced by events around us in both the near vicinity and the wider world. We need to remain aware of the trend of events in the world while we are making efforts to come to understand the finer details of the system of Deen. Human world offers opportunities for self-development. By declaring it to be fitnatin linnase, the root FTN has many meanings. For example, melting of metals, annoying someone, war, misery, punishment, leading astray, also in relation to opportunities for manifesting latent potentials. All of which point to this, that events which occur around us due to human interaction should help us to understand each other and help us to apply and practice the permanent values in order to reach some conclusions. And that is important because our life is a continuous challenge, and particularly against the forces of Batil. And we are living in a system which is well entrenched, that is the man-made system. And over here, we do face problems at every step in life, and particularly in those lands where the systems are broken down and there is a lot of injustice taking place. So Quran is helping us to understand that when we get onto the path of Haqq, Batil will oppose it. And we will also come across the problems which Batil system creates in the world. And what all we have to do is to face them scarcely, all the time thinking that this path which we are following will ultimately take us to success. This is part of the process of human self-development. This is the way this world is meant to operate and function. Hence, we should not be surprised. And over here, Quran takes away all those surprises because we can relate to the values of the Quran. And what is mentioned about the dream of the messenger is his subconscious desire, because events were taking place around him and he saw that now there is a possibility of success in the near future. With reference to the mention of Washajarat al Malunata, the tree which is a sign of divisiveness among mankind, we should look at the root of this word shajara, which is normally translated as tree, but there is a lot more to it, which also means divisiveness, which is diverting from the boundaries of life. And what can be a bigger loss in life, i.e., not being able to acquire a developed self in this life. And Maluna, the root of this word is lan, and which means to be kept away from the bounties of life and the successes of life, and thus remaining away from those benefits which are related to the Quranic system. So if we can relate it to the system of Deen, then we can understand that what this verse is putting forward, and for us to understand that the context of it. If we relate this to this verse, Sajaratul Zakum, as noted in the meaning of the verse, then it will mean Innaha shajaratu nakhruju fi asle jahim. For it is a tree that springs out of the bottom of Jahim. I think this is a sort of what is called a phrase which was used at that time. And it is, if we take it metaphorically and by the word Jahim, we can understand that it points to human stagnancy and inertia and not being able to develop further. Jahim is when growth is stunted and the human self becomes stagnant. Wrong choices in life lead to losses. And if our path is wrong all the way to our death, then of course we can see that what a loss we will be experiencing if we relate it to the life of the hereafter. In verse 44, with respect to this tree, it is noted Ta'amul Atim. So we know Itam means, which is again absence of self-development and slowing down in life, not being able to actively participate in the life. This is the diet of those who wish to lag behind in the race of life. In verse 47, Ela Soil Jahim. Again, this word is used, Jahim, towards the center of Jahim, i.e., remain in no doubt about being deprived of their own self-development. Then the verse concludes by stating, وَنُخَوِّفُهُمْ فَمَا يُزِيدُهُمْ إِلَّا طُغْيَانًا كَبِيرًا. The Quran is providing a warning about the evil consequences of the wrong path of life. And instead of these people paying attention to what is being stated to them, there is an increase in haughtiness and arrogance towards the message. Why do people do this? We observe this being displayed all around us, that people in power pursue their policies of fomenting wars and conflicts in the world despite reasonable verbal opposition to this from the populations of various countries. This is something which we need to pay attention to in the light of the Quran. And this is important because we observe it, that there is so much opposition from the public for going against these wars, and still those in power are carrying on with their own agenda. Why do they do it? If we remember, the Malaika stated in verse 230, Kalu atajalu fiha man yufsidu fiha wa yasfiku kuddema. They said, that is, Malaika said, will you place therein one who will create fasad and shed blood? Because they were told that Allah is going to put a race called human beings on earth. And they then put a question. We need to bear this fact in mind all the time when we tread on this path of the Quran, that basic default human position is that he is going to create fasad and going to shed blood. And the reason for that is because they have unbridled desires. Their intellect is not guided. And human beings tend to follow their own desires. And when they follow their own desires, and they also acquire power. And they have a desire to acquire power in order to fulfill their desires. And this is a very dangerous, very poisonous combination, which is we see in the world. And to counter that, then the Quran says you follow the guidance of the Quran. We need to bear this fact in mind all the time when we tread on this path of the Quran. This is how it is meant to be. Human beings who have a non-Quranic psyche simply cannot create a world which is based on the permanent values. And that is the message we should take from these verses today, that we cannot give up this path of the Quran and stick to it, and gradually things start taking shape in the outer world as well. And while the world is going down, if we are on this path and we are making an effort towards the system of Deen, obviously the first step is to understand this system. And once we come to grips with that, then we will feel comfortable even within the man-made system, because we know how the system functions and how we can get help from the Quran. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen. And thank you.